Hello and welcome back once again to Rage Gaming and a new Diablo 4 build video. Today I'm finally revisiting the blood builds, specifically in this case it's Bloodlance, to update you guys on the state of its power. When I first covered Blood Surge and Bloodlance, it was during those first days of Season 2 when I didn't have my Paragon points and certainly not all the uniques. But now with the ideal setup, I'm doing Uber Lilith. And yeah, that's a cool 8 million hit followed up by an instant 10 million hit, essentially emptying her of all her health, and then I follow it with multiple 5 or 6 million hits in many ticks and another 10 mil all at the start of phase 2, with following like 9 mil hits and so on. It's strong. The burst is literally competitive with Bone Spear, which is something I did not expect to see. The consistent output here requires a bit more thought and practice, some minor skill involved compared to Bone Spear's brain dead throw spam, but wow, Lance DPS and single target is way better than I ever imagined it would be and is genuinely competitive. On the other hand, we have tier 100 pushing, of course, which as you should know, blood builds have always been great at that, especially since season 1. You've just got lower output than the other builds. You're able to clear these anyway thanks to the way blood builds are so survivable. You've got so much healing, overhealing, fortify, damage reduction, damage avoidance, and you can clear it if you just take your time. But in season 2, with this kind of damage and all of that inherent blood build defensive nature, well, we're not only crunching every elite pack boss we come across, but also very convincingly. Honestly, the footage you're seeing here is pretty overkill on the damage side of things and probably underbaked in terms of survivability. In future clears, I'm going to swap out certain gear to get more defensive aspects in the build just for smoother runs, but this is still completely possible and was no issue. We'll talk about all that in the gear section because I also have a simple aspect to swap when you're doing single target versus mob clear. I think it's fair to say now that Bloodlance and blood builds are meta competitive, and that's really exciting. So let's just explain the build and everything involved. Beginning as always with the skill tree, we'll do a short rundown. As you see, we have Hemorrhage as our main basic, enhanced to Acolytes to get some extra attack speed when it's healthy, and remember, after you consume a blood orb, your next Hemorrhage becomes AoE with extra essence for that, and Hemorrhage even has a 20% chance to form a blood orb. It's very good basic. Our core skill, of course, is Bloodlance, leveled to 5 out of 5, and I'm getting a lot from my items. We enhance it and go Supernatural for the guaranteed overpower, and we get 1 unliving energy to get to imperfectly balanced, 3 out of 3, so that things cost a bit more in terms of core skills, but they deal more damage. On the next tree, we just have 1 level of Blood Mist, enhanced, which will help reset the cooldown as you overpower, and then Ghastly for the guaranteed spawns of corpses, should we need that. On the next tree, we're of course going 1 into Decrepify. We get some from our items here, enhanced and abhorrent, meaning we have a lucky chance to reset some cooldowns, which can be nice for our ultimate. We'll amplify the damage to its maximum, so those cursed by Decrepify are taking way more damage. 3 out of 3 on Death's Embrace to deal more to close enemies and take less from them, and Death's Reach to improve our damage to distant enemies because we do play from pretty far, especially in tier 100s. On the next tree, we get 1 level into Corpse Tendrils, enhanced, and of course go for Blighted so that we're generating blood orbs as we pull in packs of enemies and get loads of them to blast with blood lances. Here we have our blood passives, 3 out of 3 in Gruesome Mending for more healing, Coalesce Blood for more damage with blood skills while healthy, Tides of Blood increasing our overpower damage, doubled when we're healthy, Drain Vitality means we're going to generate some Fortify, and 1 point into Transfusion. This is our new skill, like it's new in season 2, and it's just not been as impressive as we hoped, but having 1 level in it means we have a chance to generate blood orbs by dealing damage with blood skills, which is nice to have, and it's doubled against bosses. On the ultimate tree, we're of course going Bone Storm and enhancing it with Prime and Supreme for the crit strike chance and damage reduction. Why not Blood Wave in a blood build, you might be wondering? Well, it's certainly nice to have, especially when you're generating the blood orbs in a consistent way and it has a shorter cooldown, but Bone Storm just provides more. It protects you better and it enhances your damage better. Blood Wave itself doesn't really do all that much. It just generates 3 blood orbs, and we have other ways to generate them, so it just feels like a big waste, where Bone Storm feels really impactful. Also here, it's a full sacrifice build, so standalone and Memento Mori as always. 3 out of 3 Inspiring Leader, so we get some more attack speed while healthy for 2 seconds. And lastly, we have Rathma's Vigor as the key passive, of course. Guaranteed overpower every 12 seconds while healthy, and we can reduce that by healing or overhealing with blood orbs. Next, we have the Book of the Dead, which is really simple. We go for the Skirmisher Sacrifice for the crit strike chance. Skeletal Mages are of course Bone for the overpower damage increase, and then on the Golem, it's actually Iron as a sacrifice. The crit strike damage is just very potent. It's a very big, important part of the build, and with all the changes to overpower and the way it works in season 2, it doesn't feel like as strong as a sacrifice as it used to this blood one. Next up then we have the Vampiric Powers, which is interesting because, you know, there's a lot of good options. What I'm running is the classic combo of Metamorphosis and, of course, Prey on the Weak, improving our vulnerable damage and making Vampiric Curses calls vulnerable as a consistent source of that damage type. We dash through them with meta and give them that vulnerable and that curse through that, greatly raising our damage, which is very nice. Next, it's attack speed. We need a lot of attack speed in this build. The more attack speed you have, the more you send out Blood Lances. The faster you send them out, the more guaranteed Blood Lance overpowers you get. So we run the two that give that, which is Ravenous, increasing your attack speed by 40% of your total move speed, and Moonrise. Hitting an enemy with a basic skill grants you attack speed for 10 seconds, which stacks up 5 times, eventually going into a Blood Rage, improving the damage of your basic skill and giving you extra movement speed for 10 seconds, which yes, will be relevant with Ravenous. So these two give us all the attack speed we could possibly want. Lastly, the thoughts are a little bit up to you. I like Undying because I'm running a specific aspect, Untimely Death. Each percent of your max life you heal beyond 100%, it basically empowers your next overpower even more. So having some healing in that way on top of everything else is quite nice. Alternatively, you could go Resilience or go for the Brace, which gives you more fortify potential and crit strike chance as you do that. It's very good for mob clear, but maybe not so good in a single target boss fight. So those are the 3 options that I'm bouncing between. Next up, we have the Paragon board, where we have a grand total of 5 boards, and I've just scoured over them so you can pause and look at them if you want. But from the beginning, we come up to the right and work our way up to our first glyph socket, which, as before, is still Blood Drinker. You don't even need to upgrade this. You just need 40 intelligence to get it going, so Blood Orbs fortify you, which is very important for our overpower damage and, in general, damage reduction. Great in this initial slot. I also come down and pick up Resilience for all the resistance and extra max life, which are very important magic nodes here. Then we work our way up to our first board extension, which is Blood begets blood. This provides us with loads of ways to improve our overpower damage, as you can see, so we come from the bottom and work our way up, touching on Vampiric on the way, and picking up the max life nodes, which are very important. Working our way up to the glyph then, we come to the glyph, which is Corporeal. This gives you a straight 10% increase to physical damage, which your Blood Lance literally is. What's nice about this glyph though, is you don't need to level it beyond exactly 40 intelligence to get it going. Going beyond that doesn't really help, and it provides a bonus to magic nodes within range. So for example, these 2 nodes that give you extra overpower damage, they're going to give you even more overpower damage once you get this to 15. It's my last glyph that I've been working on. It's level 12 right now. While we're here though, we're going to work our way up to the left to get Invigorated and a couple of the magic nodes on the way, which are nice, but we care much more about Aggression, which provides us with a massive 90% overpower damage increase, and under it are a load of overpower damage increases and even just raw damage increases, so very good there. As we come down finally to the legendary node, Blood begets blood, meaning Blood Orbs grant you increased damage up to 15% times for 5 seconds. With this build, we consume all our Blood Orbs at once, so we have this burst pretty much every time we get some Blood Orbs. To leave this board, then we come from the glyph to the right and go to the third board, which is still, of course, Bloodbath. We want to get to this as soon as possible, so we come in and go up to the right on the way to Powerhouse, which will further improve our overpower damage, and there's more nodes that will get more of that, which is very important, and come around and down, picking up the legendary node. Then we come down to the glyph, which is, of course, Territorial. This works great on this board because there's lots of dexterity you can get from this, and you're going to net yourself 10% damage reduction against close enemies, very important, but also another damage modifier for more damage to close enemies too. We pick up both of the rare nodes, but most importantly pick up as much dexterity as we can get away with here, but overall it's a good increase. Before we go to the next board though, we come to the right and pick up Thick Hide, because next to it are more max life nodes, so it's just nice to come over here if we have some spare points, which I just barely reach it. And then we come down to the next board, which is Flesh Eater. Why we pick Flesh Eater is because there are some magic nodes and rare nodes that are relevant for what we're doing here. We get some more resistance to all elements, which is very important in Season 2, and most importantly is colour down here, which actually has attack speed as part of it, which is obviously really important to this build. So it's a way for us to pick up a little bit more in the build. We come from the top straight down, coming straight to the glyph, where we have, of course, Dominate, the most important glyph in the whole build. This improves your overpower damage the more willpower you get around it, and when you overpower an enemy, all damage they take from you is increased by 12% times for 5 seconds, which is ridiculous. It's the most important glyph, so if you're low level, I would actually put it on the second board, maybe even the first board if you have to. You need it active the whole time, but it's on my fourth board because this is actually great for willpower where I'm able to get up to 39 around this. So we enter the board, come down, come to the glyph and activate it like so. And then we come down and pick up color and the attack speed nodes around it for that benefit. Then we're going to leave the board to the right for our final board, which you should expect it be Scent of Death. Here we can get a little bit of extra shadow resistance, which is nice, but more importantly, more max life and some armor from the nodes around this. So we enter the board coming around to the right, picking the shadow resilience up and the max life is very important, and come up and pick up Scent of Death. This gives us our 15% damage reduction when 2 corpses are nearby, which is going to be most of the time. Moving to the right, we come to the glyph to activate it, where we have Essence, giving us lots of crit strike damage improvements, and our crit strikes deal way more damage to enemies that are not healthy, which in a boss fight, for example, is going to be most of the time. We activate it like so, getting all the dexterity nodes around this glyph. And that is the board. Next up then, we have the gear to talk about. We are running a wand and a focus, so we have extra aspects since we are running a couple of uniques here, so we need some more aspect slots, and that's how I found them. Also, running a one hand over a two hand means you've got a bit better attack speed, which, as I've been saying, is very important for the build. We'll work our way up from the top though, starting with the helmet where I have God Slayer Crown. When you stun, freeze, or immobilize an elite enemy, or damage a boss, it'll pull in nearby enemies, which is convenient, but more importantly, you deal up to 60% times increased damage to them for 3 seconds, and that occurs every 12 seconds. That is absolutely insane. It's phenomenal for all types of burst and burst builds. However, this is actually the slot that I would replace if I was pushing tier 100s and found that I was a little bit too squishy. This damage is phenomenal, but you don't want to just die. So I would lose that and run either Disobedience on the helmet or Shielding Storm. It's up to you which you prefer. Disobedience will be more consistent, but Shielding Storm will be more potent while the storm's going. On the chest piece then, I have Might. That is my one defensive aspect. I feel out of Shielding Storm, Disobedience, and Might's the best pick, because we're using a basic in this build constantly, which means we have 20% damage reduction for 6 seconds, always. Disobedience is armor, so physical damage reduction, where the shield is great, but it's only available when your Bone Storm is active. So this is a consistent 20% damage reduction, and I think it's the best overall if you can only pick one. On the gloves, on one of our offensive slots, I have Rathma's Chosen. You could have this on a different offensive slot, it doesn't really matter. When your blood skills overpower, you gain up to 50% attack speed for 4 seconds. Again, attack speed, super important in the build, and so having this means we have a lot of it. On the legs, we have the very important Blood Moon Breaches. Enemies affected by at least one of your curses take 70% times increased overpower from you. That's kind of insane. To apply a curse, we can just Decrepify, or we could meta dash with a Vampiric curse, right? So this should be pretty much always active, massively improving your damage. On the boots, of course, it's Ghost Walker, giving us extra movement speed with the whole unstoppable effects, and since we're meta dashing relatively often and getting that, we just get a nice movement speed increase, and that's relevant to Ravenous because we get more attack speed based on what our move speed is. On our one-hand weapon, the wand, I've got Gorquils. Again, this could be on any of your offensive aspects, it doesn't really matter. Gorquils is going to consume your blood orbs and cause extra blood lance generation, which is going to deal lots of extra damage, whether you're single target or mob clearing. It's vital that you run this aspect so that a Bloodlance build even works. On the offhand, we have Untimely Death. As I talked about earlier, as you overheal, you improve the next overpower up to 60% times on the top roll. That's a lot of damage, and I believe it's the better option overall if you're running single target. If you're running mob clear, I would talk about Hungry Blood though. Each cast of Bloodlance will cause additional Bloodlance to spawn and go to nearby enemies, so it actually helps mob clear quite a lot. The thing is, I've had absolutely no problem with mob clear using Untimely Death in the tier 100, but in speed clearing, maybe I would consider Hungry Blood and open world content. This will be really nice to have. So a nice alternative to Untimely Death. Then we have my amulet, the Banished Lord's Talisman, the unique that causes your next overpower to deal way more damage. You just need to spend 300 primary resource for your next core skill to guarantee to overpower, which is of course Bloodlance. And this amulet is why we're not running Blood Boil, the vampiric power that gives you a guaranteed overpower. Since we have plenty of them already, we don't need another and we'd lose out too much to run it. This amulet really helps with that, and it's a primary way we're increasing our overpowered damage. It's absolutely vital. For our rings, we have a resource ring. Of course, it's potent blood, while healthy blood orbs grant up to 20 essence when consumed, so you're getting a ton of essence when you do this. Lastly, of course, it's Grasping Veins as the last offensive aspect, giving us crit strike chance for 6 seconds as you use the corpse tendrils, and then those affected by them, you deal 40% times damage too. So it's obviously really impactful. Swap around your offensive aspects in any order, doesn't really matter, there's just 4 of them. In terms of what gear affixes you're looking for, on your gloves, you're going to want as many ranks as Bloodlance as you can get, up to 4 ranks. And then after that, you're looking for maximum life on every piece you can get, giving you more survivability, but also improving the potency of your overpowered damage. After that, in terms of raw numbers, you're looking for overpowered damage, crit strike chance and crit strike damage, and attack speed wherever you can get it. Other damage types like close damage, fire damage, or vulnerable damage, these are all nice, but not as important. Utility-wise, if you can find anything like this, the lucky hit, up to 5% chance to restore primary resource, or resource generation however you get it, that is nice to have. Defensively, it's the standard stuff of armor, damage reduction from close or far, but again, max health is your priority affix, offensively and defensively. When it comes to the gems, it's just rubies across the board in your armor for the health increase, and again rubies in your weapons for the overpowered damage increase. For your jewelry though, it's up to you. I'm running resistance to all elements because if we look at my stats, that gives me the most bang for my buck. Right now I'm lacking in fire and lightning resistance though, so I could take one of these out and put one of those in to push it higher if I'm going against something that deals lots of fire or something. But you're aiming to get as close to 70% in everything as you can. Now then, time for a short gameplay guide, which is kind of like it was before, but there is one difference, and that you need to be spending the 300 essence to trigger your amulet's massive increase to your next overpower. So, when dealing damage in a single target scenario against a boss, think about how you need to warm up the situation, dealing good damage to begin with, but ultimately not full committing to the fight until you've spent a bit of essence, so that big hit of the overpower is coming when you've warmed up. At that point, you can go with a Bone Storm, dash through the target to, curse them, make them take more vulnerable damage, Corpse Tendril, and slam them all at once with all that power up that you've just done and the greatly empowered overpower. You don't want to pop everything immediately at the start of the fight. Outside of that, it's much the same for mob clear or whatever you're doing. Dash through the enemies to apply the Vampiric Curse. Decrepify everything always for the huge incoming damage reduction, but also your own huge damage increase. And Tendril pull everything as often as you can to CC the targets and massively improve your damage to them. Go ultra hard on lances whenever possible when things are set up. But remember, you want to weave in your basic hemorrhages into your attacks to help generate essence whenever, AoE with the hemo when you consume the blood orb, and very importantly, improve your attack speed through your vampiric power that is Moonrise. And then Bone Storm's just used defensively or offensively or both to basically go super powered and go all out whenever you need to. And then you can use Blood Mist to set up, spawn corpses, avoid damage. It's utility when you need to. But there you have it. That's my updated and true endgame guide to Bloodlines in Season 2. The potential here is massive, like shockingly high damage. I fully expected the AoE to be good, like even better, but the single target to still fall short compared to, Bone Spear or whatever. But the burst is seriously strong. Competitive even with the meta. I still think that Bone Spear's long-term DPS is going to be more consistent, and it's also easier to play Bone Spear. There's no build-up needed. With Blood builds, you also have to try to time your key passive overpower on a Blood Lance intentionally, while again Bone Spear is just throwing Bone Spears. But it works better than ever. It's meta competitive. If you've ever been interested in Blood builds, now is the time. But for now, I've been Hollow, you've been you. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.